Hi, it's Trisha Lynn. Welcome to or welcome back to Crime 1-1, where tales of dastardly deeds rule the roost. And for this edition, we have quite a few misdeeds to discuss that occurred during a murderous crime spree following the Christmas holiday back in 2005 and into early 2006. This spate of murders is typically known as the Richmond spree murders, since most of them occurred in the area of Richmond, Virginia. But things actually initially kicked off in Pennsylvania. First, let's meet Ricky Gray. In 2006, he was 28 and he had been a career criminal for a lot of his life. Granted, he did not have the most idyllic upbringing. As a young child growing up in the area of Southern Maryland and Arlington, Virginia, he was physically and sexually abused by at least two family members. On top of that, he was surrounded by alcohol and drug abuse and was drinking and using PCP himself by the time he was 11 years old. Ricky had a nephew named Ray Dandridge, who was the same age. They bonded over their mutual affinity for criminal activity and were both arrested around October of 1995 for multiple robberies they committed around Northern Virginia. For the next decade, they were both in and out of prison continually for convictions relating to the robberies, as well as for theft and drug offenses. Ricky was released from prison in the early part of 2005. In April of 2005, he married a woman named Treva, who he had met prior to his prison stint and remained in touch with while he was behind bars. Ricky and Treva lived in a house in Washington, Pennsylvania that was owned by Treva's mother. In October of 2005, Ray Dandridge was released from prison and he went to go stay with Uncle Ricky and Treva. On November 5th, Treva Gray was found dead in a shallow grave next to a roadside. She appeared to have been badly beaten. Ricky and Ray were both interviewed by the police but weren't considered suspects. The police did think that Treva's death leaned towards suspicious, but they also thought she might have died from a drug overdose. Her mom and stepdad didn't buy that though, because on the same day that her body was found, they noticed that Ricky Gray had scratch marks on his forearm, which he claimed were just passion marks. The week after Trevor's death, they evicted Ray Dandridge from the house and he went to go stay with his father in West Philadelphia. Shortly before Christmas, Ricky Gray left the house and went to go stay with his maternal grandmother in Arlington, Virginia. On Christmas Day, Ray left his father's house in West Philly and went down to Virginia to reunite with his uncle. And from there, they embarked on a monstrous crime spree. On New Year's Eve in Arlington, Virginia, a 26-year-old man named Ryan Carey had just parked his car and was walking towards his parents' house when he was attacked by Ricky and Ray. They began with punching him in the face, and he relinquished his wallet and his car keys, and then they started stabbing him. The attack was so vicious that two knives broke off in his body, and he ended up in a coma for weeks. He survived, but he permanently lost complete use of his right arm. At some point during their Arlington travels, Ricky and Ray linked up with a 21-year-old woman named Ashley Baskerville. She had done time for federal drug charges, and she and Ray Dandridge had carried on a romance at some point while he was still in prison. It's possible that they met through an ad that he had placed on a prison pen pal website. It read, "Dear friends, don't judge a book by its cover. We all make mistakes, and what don't kill will only make us stronger. My friends call me Lucky. I'm 28, height 6 feet, weight 215. I'm athletically built. I have 2 tattoos. I'm brown skinned with baby brown eyes. Smile. I'm from Arlington/Philadelphia, PA. I love to travel, dance, read, write, and play chess. I like to play basketball and football. I like most music, sports, and poetry. Yeah, poetry. And I would love to send you some of my work. I'm an open-minded and very romantic and understanding person. I believe in treating others as I want to be treated and respected in life. I'm looking for good friends and my soulmate. I'm still missing that special woman in my life. I'm hoping to correspond with a mature woman who has a sense of humor, dreams, goals, and is very open-minded and understanding, most of all, who knows what she wants out of life and a real man. Your age, size, and race does not matter. It's what's in your heart that counts and what's on your mind that matters to me. I will answer all responses sent to me." So that was written during his time in the James River Correctional Center in State Farm, Virginia. I can't confirm if that's how he and Ashley actually met, but I just thought I'd include that because it'll become very ironic when I discuss certain events later down the road. But anyway, Ashley linked up with this dynamic duo and they all made their way down to the Richmond area together. January 1st, 2006, New Year's Day, they ended up in a quiet Richmond neighborhood called Woodland Heights, and they weren't there to wish everyone a happy new year. They were looking for a house to rob, and they happened to notice a house with an open front door, which to them meant an easy score. That house belonged to the Harvey family. Brian Harvey was 49, and he worked as a computer technician for the Henrico County school system, but his true passion was music. In the 1980s, he was one half of a two-man band called House of Freaks. Brian sang and played guitar, and his bandmate, Johnny Hott, played the drums. They developed a cult following and enjoyed some moderate success, but eventually broke up and pursued different musical interests. Even though Brian had opted for a more stable full-time career, he was still active in the music scene and had had a New Year's Eve gig with his current band and hadn't gotten home until after 2 a.m. And he needed to rest up because the Harvey family was going to be having a New Year's Day gathering that they hosted every year at their house as a tradition. Brian's wife was Catherine Harvey. She was 39, and she was a half-sister of an actor named Stephen Culp, who played in Desperate Housewives and various other shows. She grew up in Virginia Beach and was the homecoming queen her senior year of high school, after which she moved to Richmond to attend Virginia Commonwealth University as an art major. She met Brian while she was working at a cafe that he frequented, and they got married in 1990. They had 2 little girls together. At the time, Stella Harvey was 9 years old, and Ruby Harvey was 4 years old. Catherine was the co-owner of a boutique toy shop in Richmond called World of Mirth. That morning, sometime before 10 o'clock at least, Ricky, Ray, and Ashley pulled up on the block and spied the open front door of the Harvey house. The Harveys were up preparing for their get-together later that day, but only Brian, Catherine, and the younger daughter, Ruby, were home at the time. Stella had spent the night at her best friend's house. Ricky, Ray, and Ashley parked somewhere down the block, and Ashley stayed with the vehicle while Ricky and Ray crept up on the Harvey house. Unfortunately, along with the front door being open, the storm door was unlocked, and they were able to waltz right in. The 3 members of the Harvey family were herded into the basement, tied up with electrical cords, and had packing tape put over their mouths. Ricky and Ray promised no one would be hurt as long as they cooperated. Sure. Around 10 a.m., a family friend named Kirsten stopped by to drop off Stella Harvey. That was the friend's house that Stella had spent the previous night at. It's presumed that upon hearing Kirsten at the front door, Catherine coaxed Ricky and Ray into letting her go greet her friend and collect her daughter. Kirsten would later say that Catherine's demeanor did not appear normal. For one, she looked pale and jittery. But another thing that struck Kirsten as weird was that when Stella ran into the house and Kirsten's daughter went to run right behind her, like, best friends might do to steal a couple of minutes of playtime while their moms made small talk or whatever, Catherine pointedly blocked Kirsten's daughter from entering the house and remarked that she wasn't feeling well. After the fact, it can be surmised that either Ricky or Ray were somewhere just out of sight, making sure that Catherine didn't sound any alarms, and that Catherine prevented Kirsten's daughter from entering the house because she didn't want her or Kirsten becoming another one of these people's hostages. Kirsten and her daughter left without incident and planned on coming back for the gathering later, but that would be the last time that anyone from the Harvey family would be seen alive. Around 1:30 p.m., Brian's former band partner, Johnny Hott, and his daughter showed up for the party, but found the house full of smoke. Johnny had a neighbor call 911, and firefighters responded for the fire, but soon found out that they had a much more dire situation on their hands. The bodies of all 4 Harvey family members were found in the basement, and the fire was not the primary cause of their demises. All of their throats had been slashed, and they had also all been beaten in their heads with a claw hammer, which was the primary cause of their deaths. Ricky and Ray took assorted items from the Harvey home, including a laptop and a plate of cookies, because slaughtering an entire family understandably works up quite the appetite. And then they poured 2 bottles of wine on an easel in the basement and started the fire. Ricky, Ray, and Ashley then fled to the apartment of a friend of Ashley's named LaToya. LaToya lived in the apartment with her mother, Lily Ann Pauley. Lily was familiar with Ashley as being an old friend of LaToya's, but she didn't know Ricky and Ray at all, and they unsettled her. Nonetheless, they basically welcomed themselves to crashing at the apartment for several days, and apparently all they did was watch movies and smoke weed. Lily started becoming suspicious of them as the Harvey family murder story blew up in the news cycle. And at some point, she and her daughter noticed that the laptop in the trio's possession had pictures and videos of the Harvey family on it. And they became frightened as they realized that their unwanted guests likely had something to do with those murders. On January 6th, Ricky, Ray, and Ashley left the apartment to go on an excursion of sorts. That's because they'd come up with another scheme. They decided they were going to rob Ashley's mother and stepfather, who lived in the Richmond area. After they left, Lily Pauley called the police to relay her suspicions to them, but it's unclear what, if any, action the police took at that time. Ashley's mother was named Mary Baskerville Tucker. She was 47 and was a very religious, church-going woman who worked at a laundry. Her husband, Ashley's stepfather, was named Purcell Tucker. He was 55 and was a forklift driver who enjoyed baking pies. They were an unassuming, hard-working, wholesome couple who unfortunately had Ashley as a daughter, because the plan was that Ashley, who had set her parents up, was going to play along as a fellow victim while her parents were robbed. So she got tied up just like them so it wouldn't look like she was involved. That didn't work out too well for her though. Only Ricky and Ray returned to LaToya and Lily's apartment, and they made remarks implying that Ashley was no longer of this world. As a result, the police were contacted again after they left. The police had LaToya record a phone call between her and Ray Dandridge, during which it was once again implied that Ashley was dead. Thus, the police responded to the Tucker household. And there they found a ransacked house and Purcell, Mary, and Ashley all deceased. Purcell and Mary's throats were slashed and they had been suffocated by plastic that had been wrapped around their heads. Ashley also had plastic wrapped around her head, as well as a plastic bag over her head that was secured with duct tape. Incidentally, she was found wearing Catherine Harvey's wedding ring. At the outset, it's hard for me to feel sorry for Ashley because she's the one who put Ricky and Ray on the scent of her own parents, knowing exactly what they were capable of from their performance at the Harvey household. She laid down with dogs, but did not get up with fleas because she didn't get up at all. Well, when you associate with murderous psychopaths that don't bat an eye at killing people, even young children, it turns out they might not bat an eye at killing you either. Imagine that. And remember, Ashley and Ray were an item, and he ended up being complicit in murdering her, demonstrating a completely contradictory persona to the sweet poetic soul he portrayed himself to be in his prison pen pal ad. So while it is hard for me to feel sorry for her, I ultimately do, because she was young and I was once in my early 20s, and I too made poor life choices and equally poor romantic partner choices. Not to this extreme, thankfully, because unfortunately, Ashley got involved with a deeply nefarious character who she, along with her poor parents, ultimately ended up being expendable to. And that is sad. Ricky and Ray made off with random odds and ends from the Tucker household, as well as Purcell's Chevy Blazer, which they used to drive back to Ray's dad's house in Philadelphia. The police wasted no time in tracking those fools down, though. The very next day, January 7th, 2006, a SWAT team raided the father's house and arrested them both. Ray Dandridge surrendered immediately, and they found Ricky Gray hiding behind the water heater. Ray Dandridge pled guilty to the Tucker Baskerville murders and received a life sentence in prison. Ricky Gray was convicted for the murders of the Harvey family. For Brian and Catherine Harvey's murders, he received life sentences. For Stella and Ruby Harvey, he was convicted of capital murder for the deaths of children under 10 and sentenced to the death penalty. He also confessed that he had murdered his wife, Trevor Gray, in Pennsylvania. He admitted to beating her to death with a lead pipe with the help of his nephew, and she had also been suffocated. But to my knowledge, he was never prosecuted for that crime. His execution date was eventually set for January 18, 2017, and as it drew closer, a group called Virginians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty launched a campaign to try to have his execution stayed and his sentence commuted to life. They released a YouTube video 5 days before his scheduled execution, which they also sent to then Governor Terry McAuliffe's office. In that video, there's audio of Ricky Gray expressing seemingly heartfelt remorse for what he did. He said, "I'm sorry they had to be a victim of my despair. I know my words can't bring anything back, but I continuously feel horrible for the circumstances that I put them through. I robbed them of a lifelong supply of joy. I've stolen Christmas, birthdays, and Easters, Thanksgivings, graduations, and weddings. children. There's nothing I can do to make up for that. Going back to Ricky's childhood for a moment, that video contains some explicit details regarding the childhood abuse that he sustained. Not only was he subjected to frequent physical abuse by his father, but he was also regularly sexually assaulted by his half-brother. That's a significant level of childhood trauma to experience, which likely did lead to his early stage drug dependency, and those factors alone are likely to have contributed to the violent tendencies he exhibited in such horrific fashion later in his life, even if they are not wholly responsible. And so I do feel a moderate level of sympathy for him in that regard. However, that sentiment decreases somewhat when I pour through the details of the gruesome atrocities that the Harvey family experienced. That's not to downplay what happened in the Tucker Baskerville household, of course, but I just happen to have more descriptive detail about the Harvey murders. Brian Harvey. His neck was cut 8 times, but his fatal wounds were the 6 hammer blows to his head. Catherine Harvey. She had 3 cuts to her neck and chest and 1 to her back, but the fatal wounds were the multiple hammer blows to her head. Stella Harvey, 9 years old. Her neck was cut 6 times, penetrating her trachea and esophagus. The hammer blows to her head were so vicious that some of her brain tissue protruded through her skull. Ruby Harvey, 4 years old. Her throat was sliced through to her trachea. It wasn't a fatal wound, but it obstructed her breathing. She was also stabbed in the back with enough force that the knife passed through her ribs and punctured her lungs. She was bashed in her head with the hammer so severely that her brain tissue also protruded through her skull. And then they were set on fire. And their friends started arriving to their house later in the day, expecting a joyous celebration of a glorious new year ahead, only to find out that their friends and their children had been murdered. And that's how the loved ones of the Harvey family started their 2006 New Year. I tried to imagine how the friend Kirsten felt, finding out after the fact what was actually going on at the house when she brought Stella back home. Whether she's ever struggled with an illogical guilt about the fact that she unintentionally, unknowingly, inadvertently delivered Stella Harvey to her grave. She's probably ruminated over those moments at the door with Catherine countless times, wondering if there was some sign she missed, something she should have paid closer attention to, blaming herself for what happened when it was not at all her fault. I can empathize with that feeling because I felt something like it once when a friend of mine was murdered, and it's painful. With all that in mind, I am sorry for the horrendous abuse that Ricky Gray was subjected to as a young child and whatever role that played in leading him to the road that he ended up on. But the fact remains that he had a hand in the murders of 8 people in a span of 60-ish days, to include his own wife, the complete annihilation of an entire nuclear family, including 2 small children, followed up with the eradication of a second entire household just 5 days later. Ricky Gray was executed on January 18, 2017 at the Greensville Correctional Center in Jarrett, Virginia, which had been the site for all executions in Virginia since 1991. It was where John Allen Muhammad, the Beltway sniper, was executed in 2009. Ricky Gray was the second to last execution in the state. In July of that same year, a guy named William Morva became the last person to be executed in Virginia before a law was passed abolishing the death penalty effective July 1st, 2021, making Virginia the first southern state to do so. And just like the death penalty in Virginia, we are done here as well. Thank you for watching the story of the Richmond Street murders. As always, please be safe. Be vigilant and watch your 6. Creeps are out there. See you next time.